Hey everybody, welcome back. Once again, it's your girl Jasmine. So I have another video lesson for you guys again this week. So basically, this video lesson is going to be talking about how God can give us instructions now, but they're for a later time. A time that's coming down the road, but it's not current. It's not for the now, but it's going to come. And so basically, we're going to look at that. So I'm going to have you guys turn to John 13. And yeah, so we're going to look in verse 31, and I'm going to read all the way down to verse 38. So it says, when he was gone, Jesus said, now is the time, is the Son of Man glorified, and God is glorified in him. And if God is glorified in him, God will glorify the Son in himself, and will glorify him at once. My children, I will be with you only a little longer. You will look for me, and just as I told the Jews, so I tell you now, where I am going, you cannot come. So basically he was telling them now that where he was going, they could not come. But we're going to see that eventually he's going to say, you're going to come along later. A new command I give you. Love one another as I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this all men will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. And Simon Peter asked, Lord, where are you going? And Jesus replied, where I am going, you cannot follow, but you will follow later. And Peter asked him, Lord, why can I not follow you now? I will lay down my life for you. And then Jesus said, I answered, will you really lay down your life for me? I tell you the truth, before the rooster crows, you will disown me 3 times. But what we're going to look at today is in verse 36, it says, and Simon Peter asked him, Lord, where are you going? And Jesus answered, where I am going, you cannot follow, but you will follow later. There are times in your life where God will give you instructions, and at the moment he's not asking you to move. He's not asking you to do anything. You know, I've been following Jesus for a few years, and often when God tells me to move, then I move, and it's usually at that time, at that moment, at that place. That's when he wants me to move. But right here, when he's talking to his disciples, he's letting his disciples know, hey, look, where I'm going right now, you know, I don't need you to follow me now. That's not what I need you to do. What I need you to do is I need you to follow later. So where I am going, you cannot follow, but you will follow later. So I remember when I first left college, and so a lot of this lesson is going to be talking about the first time I followed Jesus. God was giving me instructions of things that I needed to do before I left college and all that stuff. And then there was going to come a point in the time where then when I saw the move of God, when the opportunity came, when the opportunity presented itself, then I would follow along. But I could not move until I saw the move of God, until I knew that it was the time where God wanted me to come along. And at this point, in particular moment, Jesus was saying, you cannot follow now, because now is not the timing. So don't make any moves. Stay where you are in your current situation and whatever you're doing. And then when the timing comes, then you will follow me at that moment. But it's not right now. So, you know, I remember when when God first told me, hey, I need you to quit college, you know. So I was in college. The semester I went back, and that was Christmas vacation. So God started telling me to follow him. And I didn't leave college until February 18th. So I still was going to school, still was going to classes and everything until God told me to leave, which was February 18th. I dropped out, and I left and I followed him. So the time was not right away. There's a perfect timing in which God needs you to do everything. And so you want to make sure that when you're hearing God, when you're hearing his instructions, that you're not just rushing into what it is that God's telling you, unless he's telling you, hey, do it now. There have been times and moments where I was talking about on my Facebook this morning where God has told me, hey, Jasmine, do it now. Which was when I moved here to Florida. There was a night where I was, about filling out my, getting my credit report and everything. And God was like, do it now, not later. And so I did it now. And then the next day, my old roommate went to go look at the apartment because she lived down here. And then we moved, then that same day, I gave my 2-week notice, and I was moving down here in 2 weeks. That was a do-it-now situation. But this situation was not a do-it-now situation. This is a situation where God's going to give you instructions, and it's not for now. It's for a later time that's coming down the road. So you'll be prepared for it. You'll know what's going on because God already informed you what's going on. So I'm going to put up the first few questions, and then we're going to carry on. Are you guys? Peace. What instructions has God given you now that are for a later date? Alright, you guys, so we're going to look at the next scriptures, and we're going to be in Matthew chapter 4, verse 18 through 20. And so here it says, as Jesus was walking beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw 2 brothers, Simon, called Peter, and his brother Andrew. And they were casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen. Come follow me, Jesus said, and I will make you fishers of men. And at once they left their nets and followed him. Okay? So when we're following Jesus, so here it is at that point in time, it was the moment, it was the time. So we are talking about how God's giving us instruction for a later date, okay? Basically, it's not now, but it's the time to come. So when the time finally comes, then once that time comes, like Simon Peter, and Simon called Peter, and Andrew, it says at once they left their nets and they followed him. At that point, when it becomes that point, then that's when you will leave everything behind and you will follow Jesus. But it's for a later date. So God was basically, what I'm speaking now is basically like, you have instructions. This is what you're going to do. And when the time comes, when it's time, when Jesus says to follow him. So following Jesus requires giving up things, okay? I'm just going to let you guys know. Sometimes, like, here we see the disciples were fishermen. They were fishermen, Simon called Peter and his brother Andrew. They were fishermen. They were doing their job. They were doing, what was required of them in their daily tasks. They were fishermen. That was their profession. That's what they did. So basically, when Jesus had approached them at the time when they were going to have to start making a move, he basically was telling them, come follow me and I'll make you fishers of men. So basically he was telling them to leave their job. So when the time comes, because it's going to be a time where God's going to give you instructions, basically God's giving you instructions of what you're going to do at the time being, he was basically telling them, okay, look, here, leave your job, and you're going to come follow me and you're going to transition and I'm going to give you a different job. And that's what they did. They left their job and they followed him. Now I look at, for me, God gave me instructions. He said, okay, you're going to quit college, you're going to leave, and you're going to come follow me. So he gave me the instructions. I don't have the journal that I had at the time being, but I had it in my journal. It was in the instructions. He said, okay, you're going to do this. You're going to quit college. You're going to come follow me. And then on top of that, he had me buy a ticket to San Francisco, and I was going to travel to San Francisco on March 1st, which I did. So I got on the plane to San Francisco on March 1st, which was not, because he gave me the instructions in December, and then I didn't leave to follow Jesus until March 1st. So I knew that, the instructions he originally gave me were not for that day in particular, but they were for a date later down the road, because I remember getting my journal in Christmas and writing down everything that God was telling me during Christmas to come follow him, and so that's what happened. So I didn't leave. He gave me the instructions now, but I didn't leave until March 1st, so it was a quite a bit of time before I actually left and, did what it was that God was asking me to do. It was for a later date. It wasn't for right now, right here. He wasn't saying, like they were to quit their jobs that day and follow him. No, it wasn't for that day. It was for a time coming, but there was preparation in between him. There was things that he still needed to do. I still needed to go to school. There was a few testimonies that I still had to say, in my different classes. A few more people I still needed to help. There was still a few more things, and I could not leave until everything in which God wanted me to do was done in the places where it was that he needed me to do them in. And so here it was. They would leave their job, and then they would follow Christ to the new destination, which was that God was calling them to. So, when God's speaking to you about a later date in time, he'll give you instructions. Like I said, he told me to quit college. And then when the time comes, when you see the move of God, when you see God telling you, hey, it's time, then that's when it's time. I remember praying and saying, God, okay, whenever my Bible comes in, then that's the day that I am going to leave. And that's when I left. My Bible came in on the 17th, and my last day of school was on the 18th. And I left school and I transitioned out to follow Jesus. And so sometimes it requires giving up things, following Christ requires giving up things for a later date when we are going to follow, when we're going to, I had to give up school. The disciples, they were going to leave their job. There may be some things in between that you may also have to give up, so it requires some time. So we're going to kind of talk about that as we carry on. So I'm going to put up the next few questions and we'll carry on. Are you guys? Peace. Are you prepared to watch the move of God to get you to where it is that he's taking you? All right, everybody. So I have the next part of the lesson for you guys. So one of the reasons why when God gave me the instructions, I followed a little later to leave and go to California and everything is because in between my steps of transition, because this was a step of transition, God had asked me to do a few other things. It required a few things in which I had to do. One of them was selling all my things. I had to sell all my things. He asked me to sell all my things like he did. We're going to look at the rich young ruler and, or give them away. And that's what he required of me. And so I did that. So in Matthew 19, Matthew 19, verse 21, we're going to kind of see that. Okay. I'll go up to verse 16. Now a man came up to Jesus and asked, Teacher, what good things must I do to get eternal life? 19 verse 16. Why do you ask me about what is good? And Jesus replied, there is only one who is good, and if you want to enter eternal life, obey the commandments. Which ones? The man inquired. And Jesus replied, do not murder, do not commit adultery, do not steal, do not give false testimony, honor your father and your mother, and love your neighbors as yourself. And all these I have kept, the young man said. What do I still lack? And Jesus answered, if you want to be perfect, go sell your possessions and give to the poor, and you will have treasures in heaven, and then come follow me. And when the young man heard this, he went away sad because he had great wealth. And Jesus said to the disciples, I tell you the truth, it is hard for a rich man to enter into the kingdom of heaven. And again, I tell you, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter into the kingdom of God. And when the disciples heard this, they were greatly astonished and asked, who then can be saved? And Jesus looked at them and said, with man, this is impossible, but with God, all things are possible. And Peter answered him, we left everything to follow you. So one of the things I had to do before God took me on my journey, because my journey was for a later date, was he had me sell all my things. I sold all my things. I mean, I had a 5-year plan. I knew what I wanted to do for my life. I knew where I was going. I knew where I was heading. You know, I wanted to be a social worker. I was going to graduate from Norfolk State. I was going to then transfer down to Clark, Atlanta to go get my master's. Then I wanted to buy a house in Atlanta, open up a group home for teen prostitutes, and live down there, get married, have kids, and live happily ever after. Right? Yeah, sounds like a good plan. Until Jesus came into my life and he interrupted it right in the middle of my life and said, Jasmine, I want you to leave college. I want you to sell all your things and come follow me. And so I had to sell all my things. I had furniture from my apartment when I was 17 years old. And it was all in my grandma's house. You know, I had it there for the time when, you know, like I said, I was going to move to Georgia, and then I'd take all my furniture and then I'd move it into my place. That was my plans. Okay. And obviously God gave me new furniture, as you can see. But I sold everything. I got rid of my mattress. I got rid of my box spring. I got rid of my headboard. I got rid of TVs. I got rid of, you know, stuff from my dorm. I got rid of all my clothes. Now, I loved to dress up, okay? I got rid of jewelry, like everything. Like, I had just got 20 pairs of high heels for Christmas. Gone. 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 Okay, gone. Bye. See you later. You're going to follow Jesus. You just got these for Christmas. Like, literally 2 days ago. Get rid of them. Okay. Gone. Everything. I had to make the sacrifice. It was something that I had to do to follow Christ. You know, he gave me the instructions. He wanted me to do something. It was for a later date. I was going to follow. And so I had to be prepared for the day in which it was that God was going to tell me, hey, it's time to leave school. It's time to go where you're going to go. And so I need you to sell all your things, give to the poor. So I gave away stuff. I sold stuff, and it was on my way. A little more while down the road when I was following Jesus to come move here, God continued to tell me to get rid of more stuff from which I was keeping at my grandmother's house. And I got rid of it. The only thing I came down here was 3 bins, a trunk full of stuff, which was like a toaster, and maybe like a few mugs and cups. But I really didn't have any of this. Like, I didn't have any of this. My guitar, you know, and the pictures on my wall. Yeah, those pictures and the picture over here. So, you know, like, just a few things. I didn't even have a bed. I didn't have anything. I had to start from scratch. There was nothing here. And, you know, I had no possessions. So I had to get rid of it, but I had to follow Christ, you know, and I wouldn't have had room for all this stuff in my car, you know. So God knew, you know, he knew when he gives you instructions, he knows, you know, what it is that, you know, he needs you to do. You know, even to the point where he had me buy 3 bins, and the 3 bins fit in the back of my car perfectly. So he knows when he's telling you to do something, you know, to give up things, to sell your things, to, you know, when he's giving you the instructions, you are to listen to them, you know, because he's not just telling you these things just, you know, because he wants to be mean and he wants you to give away your material possessions, you know, because like I said, I have more things. It's going to be okay. He's going to take care of you. They're just material possessions. They can be restored back to you. It is going to be okay. But these instructions he had gave to me, they were for a later, these were instructions that I had to do before I actually was to get up and follow him to the place of where it was that I was going before I left college. So first he had me sell all my things, and later on down the road I would, like Simon called Peter and Andrew had to do, they had to basically get up and follow him and, you know, leave their job. And so I was going to have to leave school. And so before I left school, I had to do some instructions at a now point and moment. And my now point and moment was to sell all my things. And so that's what I was to be doing at that current moment, was selling all my things, get rid of them, because when the time came, it would be time for me to go. And when I had to go, then I had to be ready to leave, you know, because then it would be my time to go. And that was it. Yeah. So I'm going to put up the next few questions because there was another part that I had to do, which is, you know, when you're following Christ, is you say your goodbyes. Goodbyes are not always easy. They're not always easy. And they can be hard because you grow attachments to people, you love them, and you don't want to leave them behind. But sometimes you have to, because when the time comes, and the moment comes where, you know, like you have the situations of me leaving school, you have to say goodbye, because then it's time to go. When the now moment finally comes, then it's time to go, and that's it. And all that's left is really the goodbyes. So I'm going to put up the next few questions, and then we're going to carry on and continue on the lesson. Are you willing to prepare for where you are going? Are you willing to let go of what God needs you to let go of? All right, you guys. So saying goodbyes are not always easy when you're following Christ, when you're following Jesus to the place where it is that he's showing you at the later date and the place and the time and the where it is. But when the day comes and you finally have to follow Christ and leave him and follow behind him when he's taking you where he's taking you, when the day comes, you have to say your goodbyes. Yeah. And it can be hard leaving people. I know that some people are like, oh yeah, whatever, like, I can get new stuff, that's fine. And some people will be like, okay, I can get a new job, or, you know, it's okay. Like, I'll be fine. If I'm going to leave my job, that's fine. But then what gets a little harder is when you have to say your goodbyes to people. And so we're going to kind of see that leaving your loved ones behind when following Jesus, it can be hard. Yeah. So here we are in verse Luke chapter 9, verse 57 through 62. As they were walking along the road, a man said to him, I will follow you wherever you go. And Jesus replied, foxes have holes, and birds of the air have nests, and the Son of Man has nowhere to place to lay his head. And he said to another man, follow me. But the man replied, Lord, first let me go bury my father. And Jesus said to him, let the dead bury their own dead, and you go and proclaim the kingdom of God. And still another said, I will follow you, but, Lord, first let me go back and say goodbye to my family. And Jesus said, no one who puts his hand to the plow and looks back is fit for the service in the kingdom of God. Wow. Leaving your loved ones behind. Sometimes there won't be any goodbyes. God will have you do things. You have to be quiet. You can't tell anybody, and just go. Sometimes you leaving comes with a warning of not to open your mouth, not to say anything. For a while when I was in college, I knew that I was following Jesus. I knew that God wanted me to quit college, and I could not tell them the date in which it was that I was quitting college and leaving. All I knew is that God told me to follow him and that I was leaving, quitting college, and I never told anyone the date. And when the date came, I quit, and then I finally said, look, that's it. I didn't want anybody to hinder me. I did tell my family at first, and, you know, that kind of, I should have just kept it quiet, because a lot of things happened in the process of me opening my mouth and saying something when I did say goodbye. Because they thought I was crazy. They tried to hinder me. They tried to stop me. They tried to get me to go back to school. Following Jesus is not always easy. Sometimes you have to leave behind the ones you love. You know, the disciples followed Christ. They left everything, their jobs. They left their jobs, they left their possessions, and they left loved ones behind. It requires a sacrifice. You have to be willing to sacrifice. I live in Florida. All my friends are back in Massachusetts. I only made one friend here since I've been here, because I know that if God tells me to pick up and follow him and leave everything behind, that I don't want to have too many connections, because I don't want, because I know what it's like to, you know, I was in college. I made a lot of connections in college, and then all of a sudden God told me to leave everything behind. And those people I left behind, you know, like, I talked to them once in a blue moon, you know, but, you know, it was hard, you know, even though I was so excited to follow Christ. It's hard, you know, especially like, you know, here I was again, you know, I lived in Massachusetts, you know, I had friends in Massachusetts, and God said, hey, get up, follow me, and that's what I did. I came down here to Florida, and now I live in Florida. It requires sacrifice, you know, if you're going to follow Christ. And sometimes the hardest things is, you know, letting go of people, saying your goodbyes. Sometimes, like Christ said right here, you know, sometimes you can't even say goodbye. And that really hit me hard this morning, because I never really, I mean, I read the scriptures last week, but for me, this one was really rough, because it said, still another said, I will follow you, but Lord, but let me go back and say goodbye to my family. Christ was like, look, like, there's no time for goodbyes. You know, where you need to go now, and it's time to go. There is no time for goodbyes right now. We need to be on our way. And, you know, sometimes it has to be like that, you know. I'll give an example. Last year, I was so sick and tired of every time God told me to move, one of my family members would get in my way. Oh, they would get in my way. And God told me to come down to Florida. I was working an overnight job, and I packed a bag like I was going into Boston, and I told them, okay, I'm going into Boston, just drop me off at the train station, I'll be back, you know. I had booked a flight to Florida. I didn't say anything about it, and I took my flight, because what happened was I prayed. I said, God, it's a Wednesday, I need a flight for Thursday, and I need a $120 ticket. And if this is you telling me to go, then you'll give me a $120 ticket. The ticket was $101, and after taxes was $119. So I didn't say anything about it. I just packed my bag, and I got up, and I left. There was no time for goodbyes. There was no time for explaining what God was telling me to do. There was no time for people trying to hinder me from following Christ. I needed to go, because God had opened up the door as I had asked, and he confirmed that it was him, that I needed to go where I needed to go. And that's what I knew. I had to do what I had to do. And sometimes goodbyes can hinder you from getting to the place where it is that God needs to bring you. People will want to tag along. People will try to stop you. You know, it gets crazy. So sometimes you can't even have goodbyes, because people will get in the way, you know. And I know from experience, you know, sometimes we can't even tell them, oh, God wants me to do this, because they will try to get in your way. They'll try to hinder you. They'll try to stop you. And, you know, sometimes God needs you to do, like, be at a certain place at a certain time to help a certain person, you know. So, you know, if they're hindering you, you can't be where God needs you to be. And so, yeah, so you have to think about these things when you're following Christ, when you're transitioning. So the instructions God gives you will sometimes be for a later date. And like I said before, there will be things in between that you might have to do, like sell your things. And in the end, when, it's finally time to go, sometimes you can't say goodbye. And sometimes, you can't just stay with your family. You have to go. You have to leave. It's that time, like you can't just wait, you have to do what Christ is asking you to do at that point in time, because it requires the sacrifice. There's people out there that Christ needs you to help, that are waiting on you. There's a time and a moment and a season for everything. And so, even though I left at a later date, God gave me the instructions for now. I left at a later date. I finally left for Cali. And then when I got to Cali, there was a homeless man waiting there for me at that time, at that date, in that McDonald's on that certain street, and I ate with him. And then when I went to Tennessee, there was a girl who was in a bathroom at a church, and she was waiting for me at a certain time, at a certain place, at a certain date, because I wasn't supposed to leave until March 1st to go to California at a later date, when God had told me to follow him in December. And there was a girl in the bathroom, and I said, "Nice hair." She said, "Oh, I like your hair too." It's natural. And she started telling her. I started telling her my story about how I was following Jesus. Jesus told me to drop out of college and to follow him. And she said, "God wouldn't allow me to get into college, and I'm here at the church. I'm about to go on a missionary trip." And I said, "Well, honey," I said, "just go up to somebody and just tell them your story. Tell them about what Christ is doing in your life and how he's helping you get to one place to another." I said, "It's just exactly what I'm doing for you right now." I said, "All I did was tell you that God had me leave college, and now I'm talking to you. And now you're telling me your story about how God wouldn't even let you get into college, and now you're doing missionary trips." I said, "I'm traveling just like you're traveling," and encouraged her. Because God gave me instructions for then, and I followed them later when I saw the move of God. And I was there when I needed to be there, because I watched God. So God may give you instructions now, but they may be for later. You'll have instructions in between to get you to where it is that he needs you to be. And sometimes, like I said, sometimes there will not be a time for goodbye, because God just needs you to go. To go. And people will try to hinder you. So I hope you guys got something out of this lesson. I hope you guys, I shared enough of my testimony of what has happened to me along my journey and the things that God has done for me as I followed Christ. Here I am in Florida. He's replaced all my things that I once sold and left sold, So I followed the instructions, and he's still faithful. He's still taking care of me. As you can see, I got a roof over my head. He's taking care of me. I'm living a good life. I eat. I have a job. And I have a car to drive around. He's good. And when he had me leave school, I had nothing. He's good. He's faithful. So I just encourage you to listen to God's instructions that he has for you now. You will follow along later in a time of transition. Make sure that you listen to the instructions that he has for you now. Maybe it's to sell all your stuff. Maybe I don't know what he's going to have you to do in the in-between. That's in between you and God. There's in-betweens. Like I remember when God was having me, like I said, work and to buy a car. That was my in-between before he had me leave Florida. I couldn't get to Florida without my car. That was at one point my in-between before I was to fully follow. And you never know what the road's going to lead you to as you follow Christ. So I pray for you guys on your transition as you guys are heading to wherever it is that God is taking you on a later date. I pray that you guys do whatever is required of you to do as God speaks to you about the instructions that he wants you to do now before you actually move on your later date. And I pray that it's easy for you to say goodbye so that you can do the things in which, well, maybe not say goodbye, but able to leave your loved ones behind as you transition and let go and move on to the place where it is that God is taking you to. I love you guys so much, and I encourage you guys to follow Christ wherever He's taking you. I know it's a lot of sacrifice. I know that transition is not easy. I know that leaving people behind, leaving things behind, and letting go is often hard. But if Christ is asking you to do it, I am telling you it is more than worth it. Leaving school was hard for me at first, but it is one of the best experiences I've ever had in my life. It's been rough. I can't say it's been easy. I've had really hard nights where I've cried a lot. But at the end of the day, like I said, it is more than worth it. All the people that I've helped, all the lives that have been changed, being used of God, has been amazing. All the tears, all the hugs, all the life changes are worth it, and I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. I love you guys so much. Until we meet again, God bless. Peace. Following Jesus sometimes means not saying goodbye to those you love. Are you willing to leave them behind?